Well, hey there, beautiful people. My name is Doug Milms, and I serve as one of our pastors here, and I want to welcome you to our online experience. I'm standing here right now. It's really early in the morning. It's like, 7:30, 8 o'clock, something like that, because I just left our prayer, which has been a powerful experience for us because we are in the middle of our 21 days of prayer, and actually on the tail end, I guess, at this point. We've got one more week left. And so I would hope that as you are experiencing this, you would join us, perhaps not in our space at 645, even though we would love to have you here, but continuing to pray and seek the Lord for what you need in this life and for what He would speak to you. Today, we are in week 3 of our Legacy series. If you want to catch up on that, you can go check it out on our YouTube page. All of those sermons are there, along with our full online experience. But for now, let's head on to our teaching today.
Well, happy day. So good to be with you today, particularly if this is your first time with Renovation. Thank you for sharing your time with this community. If this is your first time with any community of Jesus followers, really big thanks to you for taking your chance on this one. Ours is a community to which you can belong, even before you believe. And to be more specific, if you're not yet a follower of the way of Jesus, you don't have to go through some sort of pre-conversion to experience and be a part of our community. In fact, this is a community to which you can belong while you work out what you believe. And so if you were once a follower of the way of Jesus, or perhaps you're in a season of deconstruction, we want you to know that this is a safe place to ask questions and a community of people who will walk alongside you. Today, we are in week 3 of our series, Legacy, creating a financial vision that leaves a lasting impact. If you'd like to follow along with the prepared sermon notes, please scan the QR code on the screen and you'll be taken automatically to the live event. In week 1 of this series, we learn that God gives first. God gives His first and His best, and you and I are recipients of that unending generosity. And then in week 2, having seen that God gives first, we asked and answered 2 questions. Number 1, how do you respond to God's generosity? And number 2, are you and I owners or managers of what we have? And what we discovered is this, that God owns, I manage, legacy secured. Though we often see ourselves as owners, if we see ourselves as managers, then we position ourselves to create a financial future that leaves a lasting impact. Today, we're going to discover the 4 primary roadblocks to our success in creating a financial vision that leaves a lasting impact. Each of us has or do struggle with one or more of these roadblocks. And if we can overcome them, if we can remove them, we can create an incredible financial future. As always, if you have any questions at any point, please text sermon question to 94000 and we will address them. Unrelated side note, especially if you're a follower of the way of Jesus, please go to www.renovationchurch.com/pray and begin praying and fasting for our 21 days of prayer. It is the second most important season in the life of our church and connected not only to your well-being, but to Renovation's grand opening and the flourishing of our church in general. Come when you can, 6:45 a.m. right here at Water Place. Stream when you can't, but please pray. Now, if you pulled up that Bible app event with a QR code, then you know we're in Proverbs, and we're going to read just a few verses. If you don't have a Bible on hand, they're going to put it up on the screen, so don't worry. You can check it out there. Proverbs 3, starting in verse 9, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Then, that's a clause, right? Then your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. Those are euphemisms, of course, and we'll get into that as we go along. Recently, I heard a powerful story about a beautiful vision carried out by an unlikely candidate, a 6-year-old little girl. Hattie Mae Wyatt, a 6-year-old girl who lived and grew up near Grace Baptist Church in Philadelphia, here in the U.S., noted that the Sunday school at her church was incredibly crowded. Growth is always a double-edged sword in any industry. Many of you business leaders know that. And though it was exciting to see the Sunday school classes were crowded, it also created its own challenge. Hattie Mae, as only a 6-year-old, Wood brought this problem to the attention of Russell H. Conwell, the pastor there at Grace. He was delighted by her initiative and told her that one day they would have buildings big enough to allow everyone to attend without crowding. Well, she replied, "I hope you will. It is so crowded that I'm afraid to go in there alone." He replied, "When we get the money, we will construct one large enough to get all the children in." It was a wonderful tete-a-tete between a concerned congregant and her pastor. 2 years later, unfortunately, in 1886, Hattie Mae died. The circumstances surrounding her death, I am unsure, but I am sure it was a great loss for both her family and her church. After the funeral, Hattie Mae's mother gave the pastor a little bag that she had found under her daughter's pillow. It contained 57 cents in change that Hattie Mae had saved up, along with a note that read, "To help build a bigger building so that more children can go to Sunday school." The pastor was obviously moved by this small child's vision and devotion. In an effort to multiply her gift, he changed all the money into pennies and offered each penny for sale. He received $250 and 54 cents were given back. The $250 was then changed into pennies and sold by the newly formed Wyatt Mite Society, a somewhat veiled reference to Jesus' parable about the widow's mite, a tiny gift that has outsized impact. And in this way, Hattie's 57 cents kept multiplying. 26 years later, after her death, in a talk entitled "The History of the 57 Cents, the pastor explained the results of Hattie Mae's investment of her first and her best. A church membership of over 5,600, a hospital where tens of thousands have been treated, 80,000 young people going through university, 2,000 people going out to preach the gospel. All of this happened because Hattie Mae Wyatt invested 57 cents with vision. Now, there are so many gems from this story that it is hard to zero in on one. Yes, you have the theme of multiplication, which runs throughout the scriptures. What cannot be achieved by addition, God does by multiplication. You have the theme of reaping and sowing. The scripture tells us in repeated ways that you reap what you sow, only many times more. If you sow good, you reap good. If you sow kindness, you reap kindness. If you sow generously, you reap generously. And the opposite of each of those and more is true. But what stands out to me among these many gems is the theme of God-given vision for the resources He has entrusted to us. When we have a God-given vision for ourselves, for our families, for our church, and we invest in that vision, God does with that investment what we could have never done on our own. When you give to the Lord, what you invest in His discretion and in His direction, He multiplies the impact 100 times or more. It was certainly the case for Hattie Mae, whose 57 cents became what could only be calculated as hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of investment and an eternity worth of impact. She had a vision, a Sunday school class for every child. She invested only 57 cents, but it was her first and her best, and God did more with it than she could have ever imagined. I want to believe that we all want to be and live like Hattie Mae. I do believe many of you would be a part of this community, that are a part of this community, even gathered today, if somewhere in your heart, even way down deep, it's hard for me to believe that you wouldn't want this level of impact over your lifetime. The question then is, what is in our way? Why is it that we do not believe we have the means to leave a lasting impact? Why don't the vast majority of people who say they follow Jesus bring their first and their best to Him as they invest in their own financial future? I believe it is really quite simple. We have roadblocks that cloud our vision of God's vision for our resources. You can probably come up with several roadblocks, given enough time to sit and think about them, but I believe that there are 4 underneath which any other could fall. We have roadblocks, and those roadblocks are prohibiting us from seeing as God sees and doing as God would have us to do. And because of those roadblocks, God's vision for our resources is far greater than our vision for our resources. Of course, when I say our, I mean ours in the sense that we heard last time, as managers, not owners. If we could, like 6-year-old Hattie Mae, get a bigger vision for our 57 cents, then the impact possible, both personal and corporate, is extraordinary. We may be starting at 60 or 26 rather than 6, but if we begin today working to remove each of these roadblocks, then leaving a legacy of lasting impact will be well within our reach. I'm tempted to say it's actually guaranteed. Now, as I said, I believe there are 4 major roadblocks that we need to remove before we are truly able to get God's vision and have a lasting impact for our families, for the church, for the world around us. And if you were here in week 1 or not, let me remind you that we as Jesus people, I'm saying to the Jesus people, we could have $139 billion more impact if we would follow Jesus' way. Now, the first roadblock we have is a lack of financial literacy. Hear that again, a lack of financial literacy. Do you know why we are so uncomfortable talking about money and dealing with money and handling money? Because by and large, our nation, even the world, is illiterate regarding money. Though there are several definitions of financial literacy, the one that resounded most for our context is this one. Financial literacy is the combination of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and ultimately behaviors that translate into sound financial decisions and appropriate use of financial resources. Research suggests that there are at least 8 key components of financial literacy: earning, spending, saving, investing, borrowing, giving, and protecting. Protecting, meaning understanding what you have and guarding against fraud and those other things. Protecting. The scriptures, of course, have a great deal to say about financial literacy. Jesus spoke more about money and its uses than he did heaven or hell. But Solomon's words ground this conversation powerfully. He says, know well the condition of your flock and pay attention to your herds, for wealth isn't forever. Not even a crown lasts for all time. When hay is removed and new growth appears and the grain from the hills is gathered in, lambs will provide your clothing and goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food, food for your household, and nourishment for your female servants. Of course, we do not generally deal in flocks and herds any longer, do we? Except for some of you urban hipsters. But the principle remains the same, as that was their form of income and currency. So don't get lost in the agricultural reference and miss the power of the point he's making. Solomon is prescribing a knowledge, skill, and set of behaviors that will lead to appropriate use of your resources, herds and Bitcoin alike. With that in mind, listen to his instruction. He's saying, know well the state of your wealth and your possessions. Pay close attention to that which God has entrusted to you. It literally means to set your heart upon it and keep account of its condition. You should know how much you actually have and where it's going so that you can make good use of what you have been given by God. This is vitally important. Often the issue for many of us is not that we don't have enough, but that we don't manage well what we have. Why? Because we lack financial literacy. We think we can't give or that we're going to come up short in our life when in fact, we're just mishandling what we've been given. In fact, I saw this post on Twitter. Yes, that still exists. Being adult is 90% worrying about money and 10% spending money you don't have on treats because you worried a lot this week. Family, we can't keep living like this. We have to get literate and apply the word to our resources. The solution, become literate and manage wisely what you have. And the reward for financial literacy and literate behavior, well, in the agricultural reference, you'll have wool for clothes. You'll have the raising and selling of goats for money to allow for investment. There'll be enough milk for everyone to have a full belly. In other words, your possessions will provide enough for you and your entire household. Now, practically, there is a path to literacy. You need to create a budget. Luke 14, 28 and 30, count the cost. You need to honor the Lord. Proverbs 3, 9 through 10, bring back to God your first and your best and you'll be blessed. You need to pay yourself first, meaning saving. You need to pay your bills promptly. You need to get your credit report. You need to check your credit score regularly. You need to manage your debt and invest in your future self through your job or some other means. Now, the second roadblock that we have to remove is little long-term vision. Going back to Hattie Mae's story, she had a vision for what she wanted to see happen, a non-terrifying experience in a less crowded Sunday school. So she began to sow toward that vision. We lack long-term vision, and we live like it, particularly with respect to our resources. It is our lack of long-term vision that causes us to consume everything we have, even past our margin. Statistically, U.S. citizens spend 127% more than what they have. How are we going to have a lasting impact and a legacy when we're spending 27% more than we even bring in? How do we make generational gains if we use all we have and more before we even get more? Yet the scriptures paint a very different picture, a challenging picture. The good leave an inheritance to their children's children. Now, the good leave a legacy to 2 generations deep to their grandchildren. I know none is truly good but Jesus. I know that. Don't check my theology. What Solomon is saying, though, is that the truly righteous, those who have been put in right standing by God, for God, have a vision for generations that exceed their immediate desires. The righteous do not consume everything that they have on hand. Over and against little babies brag, getting paid, this is the most I've ever saved. The scriptures tell us that in the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but the foolish man devours all he has. A fool consumes all they have with no guarantee that there'll ever be more. A wise person has a vision beyond themselves. Will you be wise or foolish? Will we buck the trend of devouring our margin and more, or will we determine today to do something differently so that we can see something different? The third roadblock that we must remove is related to the second, and it's large liabilities. A liability is money you owe to another person or institution. A liability might be short-term, such as a credit card balance, or long-term, such as a mortgage. But all of your liabilities should factor into your plan for building a financial legacy that makes a lasting impact. People in the U.S., we are saddled with liabilities, and it's crushing us. It's crushing some of you, beloved. Credit card debt increased $2 trillion since March 2020, $2 trillion. As a society, we owe so many people so much money that there is no wonder our vision for God's vision is clouded. We can't see anything past our piles of liabilities. But what do the scriptures say about liabilities? Well, the writer of Proverbs says, one who has no sense shakes hands in a pledge and puts up security for a neighbor. Further, the writer of Proverbs says that the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is slave to the lender. The writer of Proverbs says, further, do not be one who shakes hands in pledge or puts up securities for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you. And our brother Paul in Romans 13:8 says, owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. If you didn't get the picture from that barrage of scriptures, debt should be approached with extreme caution. In our society, debt is far too easy to accumulate. The economic system provides for this ease. From student loans to mortgages, credit cards to car notes, we easily collect mounting liabilities. And what debt does is puts us in bondage, and consumer debt makes it extremely difficult to build wealth for the sake of generosity. In fact, 1/3 of professed followers of Jesus in the U.S. are hamstrung by debt, which is why our church, Renovation, next year is going to take us through a debt relief program. But what do we do until then? Well, earlier in the message, I listed one of the keys to financial literacy is managing debt. Well, here's how. Once you build your budget, use your budget to stay on top of debt by reducing spending and increasing repayment. Develop a debt reduction plan, such as paying down the loan with the highest interest rate first. If your debt is excessive, contact the lenders and renegotiate repayment, consolidate loans, find a debt counseling program, work to pay off credit card debt if you are in it. And then once you get all of your consumer debt paid off, car notes included, then it's time to focus on paying that mortgage off early. But do something, start now. Now, if you had not noticed, each of these roadblocks is intricately connected to one another. If you're asking yourself why our society is so saddled with debt, well, it's because of the fourth roadblock that we must remove: landfill living. Landfill living, Pastor? Yes, landfill living. In his little book, The Treasure Principle, Randy Alcorn offers this potent illustration. He says, take a ride with me. After a few miles, we turn off the road. We pass through a gate and fall in line behind some large trucks. The vehicles ahead are filled with computers, stereo systems, furniture, appliances, Jordans, toys, even cars, and other items that maximize the drip. I added that last part for contextualization. Higher and higher we climb until we reach a parking lot. There, the drivers unload their cargo. Curious, you watch someone hoist a computer over the edge. It was a PC, by the way. Now you have to know what's going on. You scramble out of the car and you peer over the precipice. And at the bottom of this pit is a giant pile of stuff. Finally, you understand you're at a landfill, the final resting place for all of the things we own and the things that own us. Did you allow your imagination to go there? Did you go there and let it show you this truth that sooner or later, eventually everything we purchase or get a loan to own ends up in a landfill? Cars, Christmas presents, boats and ball caps, barbecue accessories, stereos, stuff that fills our homes. It will all end up in a landfill at some point. The the things that our children fought over, the things that ended friendships, the things that required lies and dissolved marriages, all of it will end up in a landfill. And against that backdrop of what we live for are Jesus' stinging and unsettling words. Don't store up treasures for yourself on earth, where moth eat and rust destroys and where thieves break in and steal. Store up treasures for yourself in heaven, where moths and rust can't destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. What is Jesus on about? Well, it's pretty plain. If you live for the landfill, you lose. Eventually, everything you have will rust. Moths will chew through your best suits. People will take it. But if you live for a legacy here and beyond here, then you don't have anything to worry about in the consequences of landfill living. Further, your heart will be tethered to an eternal reward rather than the temporal things that all eventually dissolve. If you're going to create a financial vision that leaves a lasting impact, then this roadblock and all others must be removed. Now, when you consider these 4 roadblocks, which one is the most significant for your life right now? Is it a lack of literacy? Is it a lack of long-term vision? Is it a plethora of liabilities? Is it living for the landfill? Heck, is it all 4? Whatever the roadblock is that is prevalent in your life, if you or I are going to have a financial future that leaves a legacy, we must overcome these 4 roadblocks. Otherwise, what we build has no promise of lasting. These roadblocks are not only robbing you of abundant life, but they are prohibiting you from promoting and producing the generational flourishing that God has promised you. So what do we do? Well, I want to challenge you today to get God's vision for what God's given. Get God's vision for what God's given, for what He has given you. How do you do that? Start by being honest about the roadblock or roadblocks that are in your way. And then revisit the scriptures that I've shared with you today and ask Jesus to bring them to life for you. Further, check out my post this week at leonscrump.com. And there I will share some helpful sites and insights that I believe will help you remove the roadblocks if you welcome God's Spirit and power to help you do so. The good news we have today is that the grace of God is applied to every one of our lives, including our finances and how we have allowed our choices to create roadblocks for us. But we must appropriate that grace if we are truly to be free. And for those of you who follow the way of Jesus, our financial legacy is secured only when we are no longer bound by one or more of these roadblocks before us and we gain God's vision for the things He has entrusted to us. Like Hattie Mae, we have to see beyond ourselves toward a grander vision for those we love and the generations to follow. And when we do this, the opportunity for God to multiply what we wisely manage is mind-blowing. So today, get a vision for a clear path free of roadblocks. Hold tight to it as you forge a financial future that honors God and His vision for what He has entrusted to you. And lean into the grace of God that as a follower of the way of Jesus has been poured into your life so that you understand that what you have is not the definition of who you are. And listen, if you're not a follower of the way of Jesus, my invitation to you is the same. Get a new vision. Apply these principles. But know that until you're hand in hand with Jesus, they will only go so far. And yet, even if you're not, He loves you still. We can have a great financial future, a legacy that provides an abundant life here, that provides flourishing for generations as we move toward the eternal life we've been promised. Let's start today and not delay. I love you, and we'll see you next time.
I turned my sorrow into gladness, morning into joy, yes you did. Turned my weeping into music, my shame into a testimony, yeah. your love. Every good thing is poured out. Every good thing is poured out. Whoa. Every good thing is poured out from the abundance of your love. Every good thing is poured out. Every good thing is poured out. Yeah. Every good thing is poured out from the abundance of your love. Every good thing is poured out. Every good thing is poured out. We are free to dance. We're free to move. Our bodies filled with pride, elevated by every word you speak. I'm elevated by every word you speak. I'm elevated by you. Every good thing is poured out from the abundance of your love. Every good thing is poured out. Every good thing is poured out. One more time, sing that. Every good thing is poured out from the abundance of your love. Every good thing is poured out. Every good thing is poured out. Oh, yeah.
Well, hey there. I hope that time of teaching and worship has been powerful for you. Renovation Online exists for the purpose of connecting people with the hope of Jesus. And every week we'd like to take just a moment to invite those who perhaps for the first time have believed the words of Jesus, that have discovered their need for a Savior. And so if that's you today, I want to invite you right now to just do something simple. Text the word "I became a Christian" to 94000. And look, to be a Christian doesn't mean that you have everything figured out. I don't know of a Christian that does. It doesn't mean that you don't have questions or you don't have struggles. I don't, and I don't know a Christian that does. What it does mean is that you are aware of your struggle. You are aware of your inconsistencies. You are aware of your need. And you invite Jesus to fill those spaces. And so again, I want to invite you right now, if that is you today, please text the number that is on the screen. We would love to follow up with you, love to begin to walk with you on your spiritual journey. Second, we have a gift for you no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, whether today was the day you decided to follow Jesus or you're the first time you're seeing this and you've got much hostility towards Jesus and the people of God. We still have a gift for you. We love to show generosity to everyone that's engaged in this space because that's how God has been generous to us. And so what this looks like is that we've actually procured for you a service called Write Down Media. It's essentially a space where you can find resources to answer some of your spiritual questions. All you need to do is go to renovationchurch.com/rightnow and sign up from there. Again, we've paid for it. We've taken care of everything. It is our gift to you. And finally, speaking of gifts, we want to always give an opportunity to respond to God by giving Him our first and our best. And for those of you just joining for the first time or not sure what that means, let me explain. All of the Christian life is simply a reaction to what God has done for us. It's what it is. It's what we do. We live in the wake, as it were, of the activity, of the power of Jesus. And so every week, we like to give an opportunity to respond to the goodness, to the first and best that God gave us in Jesus. And so I want you to take just a second. And even if you would say you're not a Christian, consider all the good things in your life. Consider the wonderful parts of your life and the goodness of God to you. And then ask Him, how should you respond today? Take just a second and do that. All right, thank you for being with us and watching this and taking some time to engage with these words and with the people of God. If there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can text the word renovation to 94000 and someone, perhaps even myself, will reach out and answer any questions you may have. And we're sincere about that. No matter your question, no matter your comment, concern, please hit us up. We would love and consider it an honor to engage with you. Hey, I love y'all, and I will see y'all next week. Deuces.